Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I am your host, JP John Paz. With me today is a very special guest. He was a former ECW announcer, commentator, manager. Of course, you probably know him from his podcasts as well. He is the stud muffin. Well, Mr. Joel Gertner. Welcome in. How you doing today, sir?
Hey, thank you, JP. Thanks for having me.
So what have you been up to? What's been going on in your world? I know you're keeping busy with the podcast game, but what's going on?
Yeah, doing the damn thing, man. Living the dream. Just whatever's clever, you know. Yeah, got the 69-minute eargasm. Just had a two-part interview with TJ Wilson, Tyson Kidd, and we've got a few great guests coming up in the next few weeks. And also have a monthly podcast on ad-free shows, Patreon, with the Blue Meanie and Josh Chernoff called That Was Extreme, where we look back at an athlete or an event, some sort of theme, and we do that once a month. So we'll be actually having our Zoom that goes out to all of the top guys that have attained that level at ad-free shows. We'll be doing that tomorrow night for our July episode, and our July episode will drop tomorrow. Aside from that, gosh, man, I did a virtual signing last weekend. I am ring announcing for VXS on Fight TV this Saturday. I've got about a half dozen gigs in July, and that's just wrestling alone. On top of that, just trying to day trade and do some background acting, and during the school year, did a little substitute teaching. Just whatever's clever, whatever doesn't feel like work, whatever's fun, and whatever I feel passionate about.
Now, you mentioned ad-free shows, and that was extreme. Obviously, ECW original. I'm always kind of curious, like how the guys get into ECW. Like you hear the background, but how do you really get in? Like, how do you get the foot in the door there?
Sell your soul to the devil. No,
Yeah.
no. A lot of the guys were on the indies first. A lot of the guys, I was on the indies and doing gym shows, bootleg shows. But then again, I got in at right on my 20th birthday. So the 4 years when I had been in the business before ECW, I was a teenager. I was in high school and college. Some of the other guys who were in their earlier mid 20s, they got in after a few years of perhaps being trained by Johnny Rods and maybe going to the Caribbean, maybe a trip to Japan, and working the local indies, the New York, New Jersey area, working for like IWCCW and stuff like that.
When you break in, were you trained as a wrestler at first, or never, or not really?
Not really. I took one or two classes as a wrestler, and I already knew going into those that that's not where my bread was buttered, and I already knew that that's not how I would be contributing to wrestling as my calling. But I wanted to take at least a couple of classes just so that I had a feel for it, and just so that I could get a better respect for it. And it pays off because I'll be internet pay per view doing color commentary, calling a match, let's say, of Sabu's, and he'll do something at age 50 that's just incredulous. And I'll say, you're 25 years old right now and you're in your mom's basement and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm half the age of Sabu. I could do what he just did. Well, just realize you probably wouldn't even be able to run the ropes, let alone, and then I'll go into talking about how, even just to run the ropes takes, you have to just learn and get conditioned to it and get accustomed to it, and your skin and your body have to, it's being a wrestler isn't something that just happens by accident or because you want it to. So learning how to take back bumps, learning how to tuck your chin in your neck, learning how to run the ropes, and feeling what that feels like. All those were great things for me so that I am able to call a match just a little bit better because I do have that experience.
When you break in ECW, really as an announcer, ring announcer first, right? Is that's kind of the first start, if you will, in ECW?
Yeah, yeah, timekeeper and a part-time ring announcer. And then as Bob Ortiz went on hiatus and stepped aside for a few months, became the full-time primary ring announcer. When the Lucha guys and when Damian Seis came in from Japan as a Lucha guy, I did Spanish lucha style, and for Damian, I did Japanese, so multilingual ring announcing, and then became a heel ring announcer, which led to me becoming a manager. And then from there, after the Dudleys left, with TNN, became the co-host with Joey Styles and color commentator for the show. So I think in the history of, if we're calling ECW, a territory, in the history of pro wrestling, I am either one of two or three or one of one, somebody who started out as a timekeeper and a backup ring announcer and made it to become the co-host and color commentator of the show.
Pretty impressive. Yeah,
It was
back,
really, it was, and it was just what the company needed. It was at the time as it was happening, episodically and just chronologically and work in progress style, it really just was getting moved sideways. And I just kept auditioning. I kept treating every performance like it would be my first and last time through the curtain. And so it was these sideways moves that I was blessed enough to put my best foot forward and turn into promotions, so to speak.
Who is like your boss technically? Is it like Todd Gordon or is it really Heyman when you first started?
Yeah, you never. I mean, you're happy to be there, and you really don't ask too many questions. It seemed to be both of them on different levels and different aspects and different facets. It seemed to be both. I treated both like they were my boss because they certainly had that reverential kind of. They were in a position. I knew that they were the authority, and I knew that they were, who was to be answered to, and who was at the top of the chain. So it would be tough to tell you exactly. Paul was definitely in charge of the creative. Paul was definitely for TV, the executive producer. Um, Todd was the founder, and Todd was a backer, and Todd was the one who brought Paul in. So, and then, you would get paychecks either before or after WWE involvement. Before or after, they both at both times the paychecks said HHG Corporation, and we were always told that the HHG stood for Heyman, and Gordon. So Paul, his father, and Todd is what all of the boys understood HHG to stand for. So yeah, they were both our bosses.
With Paul, and this is a question I always ask the ECW guys: genius, not a genius. It's funny. It's like split down the middle, but some say yes, some play creatively. Is he a creative genius?
Well, do people really say he's not a genius?
They kind of blend in the business aspect, and then they kind of blend that saying, "Oh, he's a bad businessman." But really, I'm wondering the creative end.
Well, creatively, it's indisputable. Creatively, he's a genius, and he's been around wrestling since he was a kid, and he has an acumen for it, and it resonates within him, and it's his calling. He gravitates to wrestling. There's no disputing that he's a creative genius. On the business end, I don't even know so much. Not to be an apologist, but he's my mentor. So if I were going to apologize for anybody, it would be for him. But not to be an apologist. But I don't. We'll never know. I think whether it's so much if he is a bad businessman, but he was spread very thin, and he very much understood that the company was tethered to him. And as went the company, so the perception was with him, and vice versa. So it's not even so much necessarily that he's, all else being equal, a bad businessman. It's the sense that I got more is that he took on too much, spread himself a bit too thin, and was a little reluctant to delegate duties, and maybe therein kind of lied to the rub when it came to some of the shortcoming or the the falling shy on the business end. We'll never know. If there were more hours in the day, if he had less to worry about, I mean, just what if? But as it was, and especially with the way the TV landscape wound up playing out, and especially because we had two other companies that had bigger war chests than us, better TV deals than us. It was just, we were blessed and we were cursed. But no, Paul Heyman absolutely positively is a wrestling genius.
With that, I know a lot of the guys say too, like bad TV deal, bad pay-per-view deal, bad figure deal. It was almost like, oh, you had to get it. You needed pay-per-view, you needed TV, you needed the action figures, you need the video games, but there were bad deals business-wise, right? I mean, is that pretty much not the sum of it, but that's a lot to do with it.
No, yeah, most of that checks out. And when it comes to TV, for sure. And when it comes to TV, it was a very kind of codependent's not the right word, but it was we needed TN. What was helping keep us alive was killing us. And that, to an outsider looking in, how can that be and how is that possible? But it really, really was that way. What was giving us a push was squeezing us. And then, TNN saw that they could maybe wrest WWE from USA, and we wound up being guinea pigs used to prove concept that wrestling would work on that station. And we really did wind up as kind of, the pioneers that got the arrows in our backs.
It's funny learning now, years later, like how the pay-per-view companies work. Man, that stinks. You get like half of the income, but you don't get it for months. So it's like you could have a successful pay-per-view, but you wouldn't know it for 6 months or whatever it is. Just
Right.
that sucks.
Right. Now, when you're Vince and you have the war chest, you can go ahead, invest the money. It takes 6 months to come in. As it's coming in, you also hold it for 6 months. You put it in a CD. And then 6 to 12 months after the pay-per-view, once you've gotten interest on all the money, you go ahead and pay out bonuses. We, on the other hand, we were the furthest thing from being able to have a few months to put the money into a CD. Instead, to get our money as upfront as possible, I think we'd utilize factoring companies where we would essentially take a lump sum payout early and let a money company come in and buy out our rights to our payouts that we'd get over the 6 months. And then instead of them coming to us, they'd go to those companies who bought them from us lump sum early on rights buyout, that kind of thing. So, yeah, we just, we didn't have the luxury of having the luxury. And when you're the number 3 company in a 3-company war, that's, not quite a desirable position to be in.
And it's like just to think about the landscape then with the 3 big companies and how many people were watching wrestling and ECW flourishing, but obviously having to deal with the big 2 was definitely a problem. Was that in a certain aspect a good thing to be that underdog role because it kind of gets the big cult following going.
Underdog, yeah. Paul at a Q&A said that we were happy to be Snapple in the Cola Wars. Yeah, it was being the underdog in and of itself wasn't bad. Being number 3, a legitimate number 3, looked at in certain respects where it comes to brand loyalty and halo effect, in many respects, a lot of people placed us above WCW and actually considered us number 2 to the World Wrestling Federation at the time. That wasn't the problem. The problem was, like I say, it's just, at the time, and it seems crazy now, and TV has changed and more people are watching on YouTube and, there's Fight TV and IWC, there's all this different, but back then when it was more centered around TV and you needed a cable TV deal and that kind of thing, we were getting, comparatively to what AEW and NXT are getting now, 500,000, 700,000, we were getting 1 million viewers a week. And we were on Friday night from 8 to 9 p.m. when a lot of our 18 to 25-year-old high school and college kids that watched us wanted to be out of the house by 8:30, 9 o'clock on a Friday night. So we did well. Depending on the metric, we did well. It's just, again, at the time when you're up against Raw and you're up against Nitro, and we just we couldn't compete. If somebody could come along these days and be a strong number 3 or 2 to WWE and AEW, and if they could do even 700,000 viewers, now that things are getting back after COVID to the road, they would be a viable business depending on how they govern themselves. But with us, we had 1 million viewers every Friday. And again, just because of the way things were at the time, we just weren't able to make it work.
That MSG 2 a.m. sometimes would fluctuate to 1, but that was almost the perfect time slot. Because you think about it, those guys, those college kids, they're done. They're home. They're looking for something to eat. Oh, let's watch some ECW and finish drinking for the night or whatever. It was almost that perfect time slot, if you think about it, in a weird, weird way.
It really was. And we were on late at night at about 2 in the morning in a lot of markets, I think in Boston as well. And we just a lot. That was pretty commonplace Friday or Saturday night, that late after midnight. And sometimes it would be on the RSN, the Regional Sports Network, like an MSG or a Sunshine. Sometime it would be on the Spanish language station, a UHF station that was selling paid time, anything like that. We really were the little engine that could, and just did whatever we needed to, man. We just did whatever we had to do and just scratched and clawed.
When ECW is kind of rock and roll, like we're talking about the 90s here, when it starts to get rolling, what are you doing besides? Because I know everyone says okay, I had 3 jobs, or I didn't have official job titles. I'm doing this, this, and this. What were you doing at that period? Because I know obviously what we see on TV, but you probably had 3 or 4 other roles.
In the company, I was just kind of so I worked at a hotel, so I kind of was indirectly, the same way Howard Finkel was a ring announcer, but he also did travel, is the same way indirectly for some guys who were top guys. I worked at a Marriott hotel, so at the time in the late 90s, mid 90s, I was getting courtyards for 29 in tax, residence in Courtyard in Fairfield for 29, residence in for 39, and full service Marriotts for 59. So full service Marriotts, the same ones that most people are paying 159. I had an employee rate and I was getting them for 59. So I booked a lot of hotels for guys. I did that. But when I first started as a ring announcer, I wrote for the program. I wrote an article called The Time of the Fall. Aside from just those couple of things, I really didn't have, and then, and I did do some mild production, just such as it was, not much in the TNN days when I was around the studio. But aside from stuff like that, that was it. It was mostly just performing and being talent. I worked at the hotel, and I did that. If we had a triple shot, if it was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday week, I worked at the hotel 4 days a week. If we had just Friday and Saturday, I worked at the hotel graveyard shift the other 5. So I think in the calendar year 1997, I want to say between the hotel and ECW, I worked 362 days that year, and I had 3 days off.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hard worker. Jeez. You need a vacation.
Yeah, man. We'd be at a Friday night house show. I remember one time in New England, we were match number 8 out of 9 or 7 out of 8. And it would be match 5. And I'd have gotten dressed during match 2 or 3. And I've got my neck brace that I was so used to wearing on. And I'd fall asleep. It would be Friday night at 9 o'clock, 9:30, 3 matches after I got dressed. 3 matches until we're going out through the curtain, and I'd be sitting in a chair backstage and not only asleep at 9 o'clock at night, but asleep with the neck brace and a bow tie around the neck brace, which, until you get used to it is not exactly, living your best life. But No, man. Yeah, it was fun, but I was young, dude. The whole ECW run for me was age 20 to 25. And so yeah, that's when you do it.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned Paul as your mentor before. How would that relationship go? Like, would he kind of teach you the ropes, or is it kind of one of those things where you're just watching and learning, or is he physically bringing you along as a protege?
He taught me a lot. He listen, man, he put me opposite side of the screen from Rick Rude, point counterpoint. He gave me the nickname of quintessential stud muffin, which is an homage to the universal heartthrob Austin Idol, who he managed. Um, Gosh, I mean, he made me the co-host and the color commentator on his product when I was in my early 20s, just like in WCW, he was a color commentator in his early 20s. So, I mean, I saw him as a mentor, and didn't want to ever disappoint him. And he did teach me a lot of things. There was a time where, the fans always, it got to the point where, first they hated me for a little while, and then, I guess because of the sexual limericks or whatever, it started to be like they loved to hate me. And then it was almost more like they hated that they loved me or that I became a tweener. And it happened on a different trajectory than the Dudleys themselves, Bubba and Devon. Those guys were still kind of heels and getting in the fans' faces as heels and getting heat and trying to start riots. And I was trying to be cool and get over, and that was acceptable to an extent. I think somebody leaned their hand across the guardrail, and I think I kind of slapped it or whatever. I did something that was a bit too babyface-ish, and I got back to the locker room one time, and Paul said, "I just want to let you know that, Joel, you're worth $1 million to me as a heel. As a babyface, you're worth absolutely nothing at the moment, and you're replaceable. So what do you think is the takeaway from that?" I was like, "To be a heel." He's like, "Absolutely. You're worth $1 million to me as a heel." So along the way, there were opportunities to learn from him, in taking direction from him.
I like that he saw himself in you pretty much. Like he was kind of giving you the Paulie Dangerously role.
I can only hope so. Yeah.
Where did the we quintessential stuff stud muffin, we know where that came from, but where does the well and those limericks and like even the voice changing and like the inflection, where does all that come from?
Well, the limericks I wrote, the first one ever was just like Rubik's Cube. The more you play with it, the harder it gets. When I was 10 years old, I read that in a joke book, and I never, for like truly tasteless jokes or gross jokes, and I never forgot it. So when the time came, I put it to good use in the wrestling business. 99% of those limericks were written by me, but quintessential stud muffin was Paul's.
Yep.
And well, I'm pretty sure also was Paul's. He told me to use it the first time, thought it sounded villainish, thought it sounded heelish. Yeah, Paul's big into like Warner Brothers and cartoons and Bugs Bunny and stuff like that. So I know that it definitely came from him. And I think once it kind of got over the first time, or he liked the way it sounded or the reaction to it, he advised me to keep using it.
And the sexual innuendos, is that all you, or is it him saying, "Oh, play it up a little bit"?
He kept allowing me to play it up, and he would, they went from, as short and trite and concise as that Rubik's Cube one is. They got a lot, like they, four stanzas of four, and there was one that I had to memorize one time a half hour before the show. And I mean, there's just I get on that mic for 5 6 minutes, and and I'm thankful that I. Yeah, we were all just blessed to have such input into our characters, and just it was such a family, man. It really just grew so organically, and so it was. I don't know. There's obviously never going to be anything like it again.
with you having some freedom and stuff, and obviously the Dudley Boys have some freedom. You ever fear? You ever get a fear that you're going to get your ass kicked or anything like that, or you ever get a fear as far as some riots starting and things like that?
No, not really, because between the Dudleys and Atlas Security, the short answer would be no. I always felt protected, whether it was Bubba or Devon or when Big Dick was out there with us. And then you've got Atlas Security, which is just, a bunch of guys that can take care of themselves. Maybe I should have worried, and I get asked the question a lot, but never really did in the moment. No.
Very old school if you think about it, just as far as them not causing riots, but almost causing riots and causing craziness. Almost takes you back to like Mid South, like Midnight Express days or something, where like really there's the crowd is going nuts. I mean, they absolutely hated you guys as far as when you were at the Dudleys.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was, I think of us as the last territory. We were a little bit, for WWE, we were developmental. Guys got sent like, we had Al Snow there and Brockus and Scorpio and guys that were kind of in between, about to get a gimmick change and stuff like that. So we were a bit developmental and we were a bit kind of feeder system.
A lot of people compared us to world class, and we were just kind of the last of the Mohicans in that respect. That again, we were just this kind of most of our shows happened on the east side of the country. Not we went to L.A. once, and aside from that, we never really got east of Iowa or Texas or whatever. It was just it's amazing. We were able to get a magazine, and we were able to get music albums, and we were able to get action figures and video games. And again, a lot of people thought that for them we were their number one or we were their number two company, and considering how little we actually had in the bank, and that we were kind of sometimes running on fumes and just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul. And it was amazing, what we were able to do and for how long.
Studley Dudley, also a pretty damn good nickname if you think about it, right? Is that your creation as well?
I think I did call myself Studley Dudley, yeah.
Pretty funny. Like, just obviously you got to be one of the Dudleys if you're going to manage the Dudley Boys. With the Duds, I mean, obviously, highly decorated team. What'd you think about the pairing? Perfect. You're a heat magnet. They're like obviously two big tough Rumble guys. You think perfect match as far as like, okay, this wise ass trash talking guy is going to be backed up by these two guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was different kinds of heat, and I thought it was kind of odd couple, fish out of water. One of these things is not like the other. And yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a really good pairing.
What do you think about working with Joey Styles?
Joey was great. Joey was really passionate. Joey was a hard worker, just a real professional. Had really, really great work ethic, and was really just kind of not a lot of people on that roster were quote unquote normal people.
And I love, I don't care whether somebody's quote unquote normal or not. I don't care how crazy they are as long as they're cool. But Joey was kind of, he was very kind of straight laced and a family man, and had a business gig outside of ECW, and it was really cool to work with him.
You think he was the perfect like yin to your yang, like the opposites attract kind of thing?
Absolutely, yeah. He was a great straight man to play off of. Absolutely.
You think he was kind of not underrated, but almost to the fact where he wasn't as appreciated as an announcer? They always talk about great announcers. I mean, the guy carried a company, if you think about it, with his voice for 7-8 years.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he deserves a lot more credit than he gets. I know for a lot of people, they'll say that he's their favorite wrestling announcer of all time. But he really did call a lot of shows all on his own, including that first pay-per-view, and should be commended for it.
With him, was he easy to work with? Was he help you along? Like, was he somewhat of a mentor to you as well as far as commentating?
We bounce stuff off of each other, yeah. I would say so. I definitely respected his opinion. He came up through the indies like I did. He was on a show that was on Sports Channel America, I think. I want to say the NAWA. I definitely, and he had worked for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. He was, I was kind of the baby in the locker room at the time. I think Juventud Guerrera, when he came along, he was a couple months younger than me. And then eventually Roadkill was maybe a year or 2 years younger than me. But back in 95, 96, when I was in, I was pretty much, kind of the baby. And so Joey had, a ton of ECW seniority and tenure over me, was a couple of years older, I think maybe a year or two earlier than me in the business. And yeah, I would bounce stuff off him all the time. Yeah.
Because Shane Douglas do a show with him, and he was saying that, obviously he's been around forever, but Joey would help him through and do a little tap on his hand. Like, he'd have his hand here and he would just tap his hand saying like, okay, you're up or something. Like, he wanted to make sure he finished what he was saying. And then he wanted Shane to get in with a zinger or something. So he said Joey would do all this stuff no one would be able to see except for him, like a tap or like a nudge or like give him like a wink or something, give him like a cue almost, like very, very helpful, which is funny because like, Shane, you're a veteran. You know all this stuff. He's like, but Joey kind of led me along and carried me when I was doing commentary with him.
Yeah, we had a good rhythm. We had great chemistry and we had great charisma together when we were in the studio working on the TNN show. Considering he had done it on his own for so many years prior to me coming in as his color guy, I think we did real well.
What do you think about the franchise? Since I mentioned him, what do you think about Shane Douglas? You can bury him if you want.
No, I would never. Shane's awesome. He's brilliant, man. He's he's somebody that I watched and learned from coming up, and somebody who really did get to work the territories and really did kind of come in the early to mid 80s. And no, Shane's awesome, and I've learned so much from him. Just kind of even just being around him, you can learn a ton from Shane.
With you and ECW, you mentioned before about how they were developmental. Did you guys know, or did you know that it was developmental, or that Vince was feeding Paul some money and that he was giving him some guys? I mean, obviously we know that the guys were there, but did you know it was a little bit deeper than just that?
At the time, no. I mean, just whatever's obvious. You know what I mean? Like, Brockus is kind of WWE, and then Brockus kind of instead he's with us. But it could have been that it could be that he got shipped down, and it could be that he got kind of let go and told to, at the time, I mean, especially real early on, like 96, 97, I don't think a lot of people knew or saw or figured out. It wasn't made, painfully clear. I think it was left to people to kind of just divine and reason for themselves that that's, what was going on, is that there was some sort of working relationship. But no, I until working on the ECW One Night Stand '05 pay-per-view, I never got a paycheck that said World Wrestling Entertainment. All of the paychecks said HHG Corp. So as far as I knew and as far as I was concerned, like we said at the outset, I answered to Paul.
It's funny too because you would never know it because Heyman would rip Vince in WWF all the time. So it's like a ballsy thing. It's like, wait a second, you're getting why the hell are you ripping these guys? Shouldn't you be pumping them up? But he wanted to play right, that kind of underdog. You know what I mean? He couldn't give Vince a pat on the back on TV.
Yeah, and that kept us going as something different, and that kept us going as a completely different brand. Certainly different from how ECW was a number 3 brand, later on in 2006 or 2007 or whatever it was. But even if there was more of a link between WWE and us than the fans kind of knew, it never got played up on, and it was it's kind of like, I guess, Gap and Old Navy and Banana Republic, at least at a time, were all owned under the same corporate umbrella. But, if you didn't know, you didn't know, and you didn't care, and it didn't make a difference. And, and they were the last ones that were going to tell you. So
Yeah. You've probably been asked this a million times, but that total elimination, which kind of led to the neck brace, that really kill you or what? I mean, Cronus and Saturn used to lay that in.
not at the time. My body now that I'm coming up on 46, my body doesn't love. I think when I was half a lifetime ago, a lot of the manager bumps and finishes that I took. But back then, no, back then everything was just it just was what it was. It was just another day at the office. I mean, and the boys are going out there and killing themselves for 25 minutes at a time. So for you to just take a bump is just, your contribution and you dropping a coin into the piggy bank, but no, I mean, it was, they're awesome. The eliminators were amazing. And it felt, I think there was a little bit of bruised cartilage. Like, I think there was a slight, bloody nose, far from any, far from a bad one. Just nothing really to, it just an hour or two later, it was as if it never happened, and it was just perfect. I mean, it looks like, it looks like a machine gun, but that's a testament to just those guys are pros, and the production team did a really good job shooting it.
Did you need that neck brace?
No, and that's another thing that Paul bestowed upon me, and that's a tribute to Andy Kaufman. So,
Yeah.
a little bit of Andy Kaufman, a little bit of Austin Idol. I can't lose because, two of my favorite acts ever in professional wrestling are Andy Kaufman and Austin Idol. So,
Man, those feuds. The Coffin one with Lawler is awesome, but the Idol Rich feud with Lawler might be the best. 87 feud of the year might be the best. That is so good. And Lawler technically loses the feud, which is nuts if you think about it. I know he comes back about a few months later and wins, but he loses the blow-off match. Or so we thought. So it's like, wow, what a feud. Just unpredictable. And, of course, Paul is involved right in the middle of that feud, which is really, really cool.
I mean, and that's, more testament to wrestling needed us, with the territories going and with it being the Monday Night Wars and just the big two, we were able to give fans in the mid to late 90s, we were able to keep giving them a little bit of Bill Watts, a little bit of Memphis, a little bit of Dallas, and wrestling needed that.
For sure. What did you think? As you mentioned, you're $1 million as a heel, nothing as babyface. What did you think about when he turned you face? And you're like feuding with, I know we're moving ahead with Cyrus the Virus.
I'd like to think I was always a tweener. I'd like to think, well, maybe not. Right? No, at certain points, I probably was full-fledged babyface. They put me with Christian York and Joey Matthews.
Yep.
So towards the end, I think, like 2000, 2001, I was a babyface. But starting out on TNN, I started out as, sticking in Joey's craw and being kind of a thorn in his side. So certainly until Cyrus comes on the scene and starts to represent the network, for the first few weeks of TNN, I'd like to think I was more of a tweener than a babyface. And yeah, I just, especially, when I, as I trended tweener and as time went on during the TNN run, it was interesting that Paul had, spoken to me and pulled me aside about that I wasn't worth anything as a babyface. And I guess that's the power of yet, I guess at that time, and he was right, I wasn't worth anything as a babyface yet. And then later on, things change, people change, and I would be.
You versus Cyrus, Anarchy Rules, I believe. You guys had a little match. What do you think about getting in the ring and having a little bit of a, not a comedy match, but
a novelty match?
Yeah, novelty match. There you go, perfect.
I was cool with it. I knew that it would be the shits. I knew that I'm not very physical. I'm not an athlete. I knew that it wouldn't be, a 5-star match. There are a lot of things I knew about it, but I was happy, and it was a great opportunity. Cyrus chopped me. Nothing against him. It wasn't unprofessional. It's just not used to taking chops, and he chopped me, and I didn't know. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I mean, it's just a testament to, again, these guys going out there 20, 25, 30 minutes and just, you think about some of the more spectacular looking stuff and some of the more kind of impactful and the stuff that really, really looks like there's a lot of force and a lot of trauma and a lot of fire. And you never even think about, like we were talking about before, just, running those ropes for 20-25 minutes and those cables, what it does to your back, and just taking a chop straight to the chest, and just, it's just, I mean, it was unbelievable, that match. It was just, though, a testament to, it was a reinforcement of me knowing that that's not the kind of thing that's not where my, contribution would be best felt on a nightly basis. But it was fun.
Crowd's into it. It's good to get in there and do it.
Yep.
Definitely a key. When ECW is closing down, and obviously 2001, they're going to go bankrupt, and it's going to be gone. Are you there all the way until the end?
Yeah. Yeah, the very end. Didn't want to leave. Conversation with Paul at one point in early 2001 was, tell me what I need to hear so I can stay.
Yeah.
What can you tell me so that it was along those lines. But I was there until the very end. That last January pay-per-view, right after New Year's in 01 from Manhattan, and I was there for that. And I was in the truck when they ran the billboard that said that the next pay-per-view that never happened would be Living Dangerously in March. I was there all the way through February or March or whatever it was, and then by March, April, Paul started out with WWE on TV and did WrestleMania that year.
Were you in Pine Bluff at the last show?
I wasn't. No, Arkansas, I didn't make that loop. I think both of those were house shows. And during the TNN days, I didn't do house shows really. I just did TV. So I wasn't in Pine Bluff. I wasn't in Poplar Bluff, I think was the other one that weekend. I wasn't there, no. I regret that. I wish I could have been there.
I was going to say, what did you think? You think like, oh man, I know you don't think it's going to be the last show, but any regrets of just not making the last show, even though it's not really your fault, but just not being there?
Would have been nice. Yeah, would have been nice. Would have been a cool moment to have.
Were you shocked that it was closing? Like, was it one of those things where like, nah, Paul, he's done it before, he'll save us, and we'll be back?
I thought that all through 2000, like in the last quarter of 2000, I did think that. And then at the January pay-per-view, I was in the truck and I saw the billboard for the March pay-per-view. And then I was leaving the truck to go back into the building, and Paul pulled me aside and he said, this week at the studio for production, you don't need to be there. We don't need you this week. There's going to be a little downtime.
Wow.
And that's what I kind of that, because I mean, we were only getting every other check. I think we were getting paid every other check, or every other check was clearing. But we were essentially getting paid 2 weeks of pay for every 4 weeks that we worked. And I remember going back into the building after being told that there would be a little bit of downtime. And I started to kind of crumble a bit. I think my eyes started to tear, and Christian York and Joey Matthews were in the room that I was in, and they saw it, and they thought, I guess it was unlike me. And they were like, dude, are you all right? Like, is everything okay? What's wrong? And I just kind of looked at them and I was like, if you guys had only gotten here 3 years ago. And I think that's all I said. And I just went back into my kind of, just being introspective or whatever. But, yeah, I kind of, at a certain point, the writing was on the wall. Yeah.
Man, you're crazy, because ECW goes down, WCW goes down a few months later. Crazy time in 01. You mentioned the pay. So you basically, you got half pay, what you should have gotten kind of for the last few months?
Yeah, every other check I think we weren't getting, or every other check wasn't clearing. But we were essentially getting half pay for the last at least 2 or 3 months. I don't remember it exactly. I just remember a handful of checks at least not ever coming through. Yeah, I think it was more than that. I think I think all told, at the end of the day, I think I was owed around, especially if you throw in some, because some of that hotel stuff went sideways. I think I was owed $25,000 in real life money, and didn't really. I mean, not to say I didn't care, but um, I didn't go to bankruptcy court over it. I knew that the end result of that would be 10 cents on the dollar bull case, and I just didn't think it was worth it. I wanted to stay in the business, and I wanted to just be, loyal and company, and just and hopefully that's paid off in my karma. Because quintessential stud muffin. I'll give you for example. Quintessential stud muffin is WWE IP. It's their intellectual property because it was Paul's idea. So it was ECW intellectual property. So WWE got it in bankruptcy, and I've never been told not to use it on the indies or whatever I do. I've showed up on TNA Hardcore Justice as the quintessential stud muffin Joel Gertner. So, I don't know if that's a case of flying under the radar and nobody cares, or a case of, people, just doing right by me because maybe I did right by somebody else one other time. But I was owed $25,000, and at the time I was 25 years old, and I was in the business to get as far ahead as I could, and to have fun and to do what I love, and it was less of a business and more of a passion. It was more of a game than it was a business. It was me trying to see how long I could stay in the game, and how far I could advance. And so, again, not to say that, the 25 grand, didn't matter. I'm sure I could have put it to good use, but I was super young. I didn't have much obligation, and it just wasn't baby's milk money.
It still look crazy. Some of the guys say, I'm owed this, I'm owed that, or there's no way to get it back, and there's nothing you can do. It just sucks for the guys involved, for sure. I mentioned this when I interviewed C.W. Anderson a while ago, and for some reason, Paul somehow heard the interview and went nuts on Twitter. It's like 15 things in a row about how the rollerball thing was bullshit. C.W. Anderson, which is so funny because C.W. Anderson's like the nicest guy, but he was ripping C.W. Anderson, just like, you're a scrub and shut up, and like he must have had enough of the rollerball stuff. But what did you kind of take about it when you see Paul like, oh, he said he's going out of business, and all of a sudden he's rollerball? You see, was that one of those things where like, wow, I thought he was trying to save us, or was he really in California doing the rollerball stuff?
I don't mind. I never minded the rollerball thing, at least as much as the next person. I never minded it, but I never really minded it at all. If it keeps him out there and that keeps us, I didn't have a problem with the rollerball. I'm surprised so many more people bring up the rollerball of it all rather than, oh, Paul just showed up on WWE TV as a color guy.
Right.
And I wasn't even necessarily offended by, I forget the chronology of it all, but you do what you have to do and whatever. Like, I didn't even care about that. Like, it didn't really surprise me. It didn't really offend me. Like, I wasn't even really put back on my ass about him showing up on WWE programming. But I would think that to somebody who would be offended, for lack of a better term, I would think that showing up on WWE programming would be a lot more egregious and offensive than rollerball. But Paul tried. Bunham and Murray were involved. The Real World. I had heard that maybe they were going to get involved, and ECW was going to turn into like a reality show format, kind of like some of the reality shows now, like Total Divas and stuff like that, where the cameras would follow us on the road, driving down the road, going to the shows and stuff like that. There was that. There was a syndication deal, I think, with Buena Vista, which was on a lot of the ABC O&Os, like, back in the day, like Saturday night, 12:30 a.m., you turn on Channel 7 in New York and you get like ER. Well, ER is
Yeah.
not an ABC show, it's an NBC show. The only reason it's showing up Saturday night on Channel 7 is because it's part of a syndication deal, and it's through Buena Vista, which was a subsidiary of Disney. And I had been told that we were talking with them about something like that so that we could stay on real strong stations Saturday nights. I mean, I heard this, that, and the other, and you know, it, it was in, look, Paul was ECW. For me, Paul gave me a break. He gave me a chance. He gave me a shot, and he trusted me. He gave a lot of other people a break as well. He advanced a lot of other people's careers. And he really was a lot of the reason why ECW ever got as popular and successful as it was. I think he kept it alive as long as was feasibly and viably possible and as long as made sense. But if it got to a point where it couldn't be done and it didn't make sense for him, I mean, I don't expect the man to roll over and die. You know, if you can get rollerball or if you can go to work for WWE, you know, then so should everybody else be able to. And if they can't, and it's not their time yet for that, that's hardly Paul's fault. If anything, working in the ECW system has you at least closer and better prepared for that one day than you might ever otherwise be. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't care that he was in LA doing rollerball. It didn't make a difference to me.
Harry Slash, who I talked to, was saying that was totally blown out of proportion, and basically saying like, cut Paul some slack. He knows a lot of the guys were getting on about it. Kind of like what you said. It's like, surprised you weren't more upset about WWE than him being in rollerball of all things.
Yeah,
it's crazy. The just the aftermath of ECW. Did you ever have any like inclination, any shot like, hey, let's go to WWE, or at one point, hey, go to WCW, or was that never really on the table, or not really a thought?
I heard that WCW was interested.
I heard that too.
I heard that they were interested. I never really, got serious about reaching out to them. My time to do that would have been after I got my ECW release, which would have been February, March of 01. And as we talked about, a few weeks after that, by like March, April of 01, they're out of business. So I heard that in 01, they may have been interested, but in 01, they weren't in a position to start off new guys and be interested in much of anything, you know? WWE, before I ever had my ECW contract, I worked off contract for like 3 years, 2-3 years. Before I signed the contract, before I was ever presented one, I think I put a feeler out. I wound up on the phone with Terry Taylor. And he threw a price at me and said, how does that sound? And compared to what I was making at the time before getting a raise on a contract, the price that he quoted me sounded really nice. And I said, that sounds great, actually. He said, I think we're going to put you with Public Enemy. And I think a lot of us remember what happened with Public Enemy. If I was brought in with Public Enemy, would my run have been as short? Would I have been moved over to doing something else after they weren't there anymore? So, I had that conversation with Terry Taylor, but really I was super loyal. I was just, I kept getting moved up and I kept being a big fish, and I was a young dude, and Paul was my mentor, and there was never any reason really to leave. So when TNN came into the picture and when I was offered the contract and the Dudleys were leaving and they're talking to me and they're telling me they're going, and I don't know whether they're feeling me out to see if I want to go with them or whether they're just somehow some reason telling me not to sign, or I don't know, but they left. And if they ever were looking for me to either find a way or, they left and it was their time to do that. And I wasn't sure it was for me. And I thought that if it was meant for me to be in WWE, it would happen one day. So and then right as they're leaving, we get TNN, and Paul tells me that I'll be the co-host and the color commentator. April 30th, I think it was, of 99, I signed a deal. And so, yeah, it's amazing, but everything just kind of timed out in a certain way.
As we head for the finish, as we hit the wind down button, I got to ask you this because I know you know your thing about stocks. What's a good stock right now? What are we buying? What are we selling? What are we trading?
I hope I'm not too late with it because it's been doing really well for the last 6-12 months. So I hope that's not, an indicator that it's not going to do as well for the next 6-12 months. But I haven't been, I've been in a lot of communications, media, tech, really a lot of streaming. I'm in like the top 5 streaming companies: Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Disney. I'm in stuff like that. But just last week, I got into Skechers. Their ticker symbol is SKX. They've been doing really well. And in the last day or two, I'm up 1.5% or 2% on them, up from 49 to about 50. So I'm pretty long on Skechers, but again, I've been long on Apple since 2010, since right around the time that they announced that they were going to do a brand new form factor, which was essentially the iPad that wasn't even named yet at the time. I think they were going back and forth between the iPad and the iSlate. But I've been in since then, about 10 and a half years, 11 and a half years. And Amazon, Netflix, Comcast, just got back into Disney. I bought a Leap for Disney earlier this week, and it's doing well. There's some gold-backed crypto, AABB and DSCR, so Asia Broadband and Discover Metals, gold-backed crypto. So you're getting like 1/10 of a gram. It's based on the price of gold at 1/10 of a gram, and it's a way to have a gold token that your crypto is backed by these gold miners, and it's their gold. So I think that's an interesting idea because gold may be going up here in the States. It's a good hedge against the economy, but it's also always powerful in different cultures like China and India. So that's some of the stuff that I'm looking at right now.
Nice. I was lucky to really 2 stocks that I had years ago. I had Walgreens, but I bought it cheap, and they were up to 100 something at one point. Now, obviously, down back to like 50. But I had sold it. I made a nice little chunk of change. Then I had WB stock. I bought it for 11. They were almost at 100. I'm like, oh, I only had like 5 shares, 6 shares, something like that. But I'm getting rid of this. There's no way in hell it's staying at $100. Like, yeah. So I made 2 stocks that I had. I made a pretty penny, but I know nothing about stocks other than I always check to see where certain, like, I do some side business with Lowe's. I always want to see where Lowe's is. Oh, well, I'll check Home Depot, and check out different things that CVS. I'm always interested what they're up to. So different.
I remember when WWE was at 11. I remember in 2013 begging people to buy WWE at 11. Yeah.
Crazy. And now what are they, 60, 61 or 59?
60,
something like that?
yeah. Yeah. Back in the high 50s or 60. Yeah.
Crazy. Wrestling stock, crazy. But they're not a wrestling company. They're a media company, whatever Vince says, right?
They are whatever they say they are. Yep.
So for you, what else you got going on? I know we talked about the 2 podcasts, but give us a little rundown of what else we're going to see from the podcasts.
We've got some. I hate to say what guests are coming up because then on the outside chance that they wind up canceling, but we've got 3 great guests, one better than the next. Nobody's better than the next, but I mean, just huge names. More important to me, doesn't matter the name. It's about compelling stories to tell. And the 3 guests that I have lined up next, I think are going to tell some unbelievable stories and anecdotes, and I can't wait to have them on. That Was Extreme drops tomorrow, and our Zoom is going to be tomorrow. And that's about it, man. I've got a YouTube channel, Joel Gertner, where I do everything but wrestling. So cooking, unboxing, scratch off lottery, auctions, stuff like that. My Twitter is Studmuffin Says. My Instagram is Quintessential Studmuffin. You can get a cameo from me at Cameo. You can buy t-shirts at Pro Wrestling Tees. And I'll be ring announcing VXS Wrestling this Saturday night on Fight TV. Just got a ton of stuff coming up, man.
Yeah, love it. Keep him busy. Damn, that cameo sounds like a great idea. Well. I mean, you probably have some awesome limericks and some good sexual innuendos for that.
I try my best.
Awesome stuff. Well, Joel, thank you so much for all the time. I just want to say appreciate it. And you still have that neck brace. Do you still have it?
I do. At a virtual signing this past weekend, I sold a neck brace,
Oh,
but it was that one was going to start putting itself on pretty soon. I'd been wearing it for the better part of a year, so when I get to VXS, I'll be on a new neck brace for the second half of 2021. But yeah, still have the neck brace. Still after all these years. Blessed, man, blessed.
awesome stuff, Joel. Thank you so much. I appreciate all the time tonight.
Thank you, John. Thank you.